She boarded the flight with nothing but her press badge and a dangerous story. But moments before takeoff, a mysterious tip forced her off the plane. Escorted by a K9 unit, Amira Torres soon discovered she wasn't the threat, she was the target. What the dog uncovered would lead to a hidden trafficking network operating in plain sight. And one twist would bring her face to face with a ghost from her past. Stay with us to see how it all unfolds. If stories like this matter to you, hit like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. The gate area at Terminal 4 of JFK International buzzed with its usual pre-boarding symphony. Rolling suitcase wheels against tile, the hum of distant announcements murmured conversations in a dozen languages. A mere souffle of travelers, Amira Torres sat quietly in seat 32A, her gaze steady on the boarding display. A petite woman in her late 20s with deep brown skin, soft curls pulled into a loose bun and sharp, alert eyes. Eyes that may... She wore a dark green utility jacket over a black tee, comfortable jeans and well-worn boots. Her press badge hung discreetly on a lanyard around her neck but tucked beneath her jacket. In her lap rested a slim leather notebook, half filled with shorthand notes. Her phone vibrated silently. She glanced at it. No new messages from Maya yet. Maya had been her primary source inside the trafficking network for the last 3 weeks. Radio silence wasn't good. Her flight to San Francisco was about to board in 15 minutes. Her cover, a tech feature writer attending a startup conference. The truth, she was pursuing leads on a trafficking ring operating through international flights, using both private charters and, alarmingly, commercial routes. Victims were being moved right under TSA's nose. Amira's instincts prickled as 2 uniformed TSA officers approached the gate agent. One of them whispered something. The agent looked toward the waiting passengers, frowned, then scanned the manifest. Moments later, her name was called over the PA system. Passenger Amira Torres, please approach the gate desk immediately. A few heads turned. Amira's pulse quickened, but her face remained composed. She gathered her things and approached the desk. The agent gave a tight smile, not meeting her gaze. Miss Torres, could you please step aside with these officers for a moment? There's a situation that requires your attention. Behind the desk, the TSA officers stood stiffly, their hands resting near their belts. Amira's voice was calm. Situation? What kind of situation? One major graying temples spoke. You've received an anonymous tip regarding your presence on this flight. For security reasons, we need you to come with us for additional screening and questioning. Amira raised an eyebrow. An anonymous tip about me? What specifically does this tip claim? The man hesitated. I'm afraid I can't disclose that here. Please come with us. Passengers began to murmur, some casting curious, others suspicious glances. Amira inhaled slowly. Stay steady. You expected this risk? Understood, she said, her tone clipped. But I'd like it on record that I am a credentialed journalist, investigating matters of public concern. You are currently removing me from a public flight based on an undisclosed... The agent's expression tightened. One officer gestured toward the concourse hallway as they walked. Amira observed everything. Camera positions, the badge numbers on the officers' uniforms, exits. The lead officer's hand hovered near his comms. In a small security room near Gate 47, they asked her to set down her bag and step aside. Another officer, a younger woman with sharp eyes, arrived and closed the door. Miss Torres, she began. Our system flagged an incoming tip that you may pose a threat to this flight. Until we clear that up, you will not be boarding. Makira's jaw tensed. And what exactly did this tip claim? I'm entitled to know why I'm being detained. The young officer avoided her gaze. The tip alleged you were connected to a trafficking operation. Amira blinked. The irony hit like a punch. I see, she said evenly. For your record, I'm currently working with federal oversight on a long-term investigation into trafficking networks abusing U.S. transit routes. Your source is likely connected to the very operation I'm tracking. Both officers exchanged a glance. I'd like to contact my editor and legal counsel now, Amira continued, and I request that any search or questioning be fully documented. I will be filing a report on this incident. A pause, then the lead officer sighed. We'll need to consult with Homeland. Wait here. As they stepped outside, Amira exhaled. For the days she had known to be slow to movement slightly, Whoever tipped them off had to be someone with access to her movements, someone aware she was close to exposing them. The risk had just escalated. She reached for her phone, but there was no signal in the room, no bars, jammed. A loop of thought spun in her mind. Who knew I'd booked this flight? Who had access to my itinerary? And why now? Maya's silence suddenly felt far more ominous. She pressed her back against the cool wall and forced herself to breathe. Stay sharp, Amira. This isn't over yet. Outside the window, the planes continued their slow taxi across the tarmac, worlds moving while she remained in limbo. Amira paced the confined security room, her mind spinning with possibilities. The officers had left her alone for nearly 10 minutes, her phone still useless, the walls around her seemingly thick with indifference. Every second counted. Whoever had tipped them off had succeeded in isolating her, cutting off her communication. Stay calm, she told herself. Think like a reporter, not a target. Outside the door, the muffled sound of boots echoed down the hall, approaching fast and deliberate. The handle clicked. 2 new figures entered. A tall TSA officer with a stoic face, and beside him, on a short leash, a large German shepherd, muscles rippling under a sable coat. The dog's eyes were laser-focused, its movements precise, professional. Amira's breath caught involuntarily. She knew exactly what this was, a canine sweep. They weren't wasting time with human questioning. They were escalating. Miss Torres, the officer said, voice clipped. We need to conduct an additional screening. This is Canine Officer Shadow. Please remain still. Amira nodded once, her heart thudding not from fear of discovery, but from the alarming precision of the operation. Shadow moved forward, nose twitching, ears pricked. Instead of going straight for her bag or clothing, the dog began circling her body in tight, deliberate loops, nose trailing near her hands, waist, and back, then pausing to sniff around her shoulders and neckline. That's not standard protocol, she thought. Typically, they'd start with baggage or obvious concealment points. This dog was acting purposeful. A flicker of memory stirred. Something about the way the dog held its posture, the intensity in its gaze, the sharp, subtle pauses as if reading more than scent. Shadow stopped in front of her, eyes locking onto hers for a split second, then resumed the methodical loop, tail held neutral, body alert but not aggressive. Amira frowned, watching him carefully. The officer observed with arms crossed, offering no explanation. The dog circled again, this time slower, more deliberate, its snout briefly grazing the hem of her jacket before shifting to her boots, then back up toward her face. Then came a small detail, a flicker in Shadow's ear, a subtle tilt of the head, and in that instant, Amira's breath hitched. The left ear, a ragged scar, ran just inside the fur, half hidden but unmistakable to anyone who had seen it before. Her pulse surged. No, it can't be, but the memory was sharp now. Searing, a dusty village in northern Syria, 3 years ago. Amira had been embedded with a humanitarian convoy when gunfire erupted without warning. The attackers had targeted aid workers indiscriminately. Among them, a German shepherd, larger than most, fierce and precise, had pulled her from behind an overturned truck as bullets tore through the metal. She'd lain in the dirt, trembling, watching the dog take a hit meant for her, just grazing its ear. That ear, that scar. She had tried to find out what happened to the dog afterward, but the trail had gone cold. Yet here he was, 3 feet away, sniffing her again, gaze steady and intense. Shadow, the officer repeated, continue the sweep, but the dog now sat abruptly in front of her, breaking the pattern. Ears tilted, eyes locked onto hers. Not the passive stare of a working canine, but something charged, as if recognition simmered beneath the surface. Amira swallowed hard. Carefully, slowly, she crouched slightly, voice barely a whisper. Shadow? The dog's tail gave a single slow wag, an almost imperceptible movement, but one that sent a jolt through her. The officer frowned. Don't interact with the dog, he warned, but his tone lacked conviction. He'd seen it too. The connection. Amira straightened, her reporter instincts warring with the surreal moment. Shadow had recognized her. More importantly, the behavior he was displaying, circling her, pausing near her body, was a clear deviation from a standard contraband search. He wasn't detecting drugs or explosives. He was signaling something else entirely. She glanced at the officer, "What exactly is this sweep looking for?" she asked. Voice cool but pointed. The man hesitated. "We're screening for any potential threat indicators. And yet your dog seems more interested in me than in my belongings. That's not standard." Before he could respond, the door opened again. A new figure entered, a supervisor by the look of his insignia. "Agent Keller," he introduced himself curtly. "Mr. Torres, we've been advised to escalate this screening to ensure the safety of all passengers. Please cooperate." But Shadow remained seated, now closer to Amira, body angled slightly between her and the approaching supervisor. Another subtle tell. Amira's mind raced. Whoever had initiated this was watching closely, trying to provoke a reaction or engineer an outcome. And now fate had delivered an unexpected ally in the form of the very canine that had once saved her life. But why is he here? Who assigned him? The deeper question gnawed at her. Shadow's presence wasn't coincidence. Either someone on the inside had pulled him for this task, or someone was trying to use him to send a message. The officer tugged the leash gently. "Shadow, move." The dog rose reluctantly but kept close, gaze flicking toward Amira again. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep her expression neutral. "Don't give them more reasons to escalate." The supervisor spoke again. "We'll be relocating you to another room for further questioning." He gestured to the officer and the dog. "Bring." As they exited the room, the sterile corridors of the secure concourse seemed suddenly oppressive, each corner a potential trap. Shadow walked beside her now, body language protective. Amira risked a glance downward, voice low. "It's really you, isn't it?" No response came, of course, but another faint wag, the barest shift of proximity toward her leg, answered more than words. In her chest, a battle waged between fear and resolve. If Shadow was here, someone else knew. Someone playing a deeper game, and that meant the next room might hold more than just questions. The second security room was colder, windowless, lined with 2 steel chairs and a long table. A bank of monitors flickered against one wall, casting a harsh glow that deepened the shadows under Amira's eyes. Shadow remained at her side, now sitting obediently near her left leg, but his posture spoke volumes. Tense, hyper-aware, ready, the supervisor, Agent Keller, gestured for her to sit. She complied, spine straight, heart a steady drumbeat of controlled anxiety. Another officer entered, younger, carrying a tablet. He handed it to Keller without a word. The supervisor reviewed something, jaw tightening. "Ms. Torres," Keller began, tone clipped. "We've conducted a preliminary review of security footage from the terminal." He tapped the tablet screen and turned it toward her. Grainy footage filled the display. First, the entrance to Terminal 4, time-stamped 7:14 a.m. There she was, entering the terminal, duffel slung over her shoulder. Nothing unusual. But then Keller zoomed in on a man in the background. Average height, ball cap pulled low, sunglasses despite the indoor lighting, plain hoodie, face obscured. As Amira moved toward the check-in kiosks, the man lingered near a vending machine. Another timestamps, 7:23 a.m. Different camera angle. Amira cued at security. The same man stood several feet behind her, pretending to scroll on his phone. 7:37 a.m. She moved toward her gate. He followed, always at a discreet distance, never close enough to draw attention but never out of frame. Keller looked at her, eyes sharp. "Recognize him?" Amira's stomach coiled. "No, he's followed you since entry, never approached, never deviated." Keller's gaze hardened. "You were being watched long before any tip was called in." A cold realization spread through her. Someone had tracked her movements from the start. The anonymous tip wasn't random. It was premeditated, part of a larger effort to derail her. Shadow shifted beside her, ears flicking as if sensing her rising tension. Keller set the tablet down. "That's not all," he continued. The young officer spoke up now, voice more clinical. "We ran diagnostics on your phone." Amira's eyes narrowed. "Without my consent." "Standard procedure in suspected threat cases," the officer replied flatly. He held up a second tablet, this one displaying a series of maps. "Your device has been pinging irregular GPS signals for the past 48 hours. Not through conventional app tracking or cell tower triangulation. This is a secondary signal." He swiped to a new screen showing detailed logs. "Consistent pings every 15 minutes. Signal origin points don't align with public networks." Amira leaned forward, a knot tightening in her chest. Meaning what? Meaning, Keller said grimly, your phone's been transmitting location data to an unknown endpoint. Someone tagged you, the young officer added. We found a small, unauthorized device transmitting alongside your main signal. Could be embedded in the phone casing or attached externally. We'll need to disassemble it to confirm. Amira's mind raced. She'd been cautious, burner phones, VPNs, encrypted messaging. How had they slipped this in? The last time she'd handled her phone unsupervised had been at a small cafe near her hotel 2 nights ago. She'd left it charging at her table while stepping away for a quick restroom break. A perfect window. Who's behind this? She asked, voice low. Keller's expression darkened. For now, you're not boarding any flight. You're a potential target in an ongoing operation. The irony was suffocating. She was the one chasing the traffickers, yet now she was the quarry in their crosshairs. Shadow leaned subtly against her leg, a silent anchor. Keller continued. We've contacted federal cybersecurity. They'll attempt to trace the signal source. Amira forced her voice steady. You should know, I'm not the threat here. The fact that someone went to this length to tag me proves I'm close to something important. Keller's gaze met hers, unreadable. Perhaps, or perhaps you've already been compromised. The words hit hard. The possibility gnawed at her. Was Maya safe? Had her source been the real target all along? Had she led danger straight to herself? Bring in the device analysis team. Sweep her phone thoroughly. I want every byte examined. The officer nodded and left. Alone again with Keller and Shadow, Amira drew a slow breath. Agent Keller, she began carefully. I need to contact my editor, and I need to know if any of my contacts have been flagged. Keller remained silent for a beat, then said, We'll consider your request once our preliminary sweep is complete. Translation, not happening yet. Control the narrative. Isolate the subject. Textbook. But the footage and GPS data told her one thing clearly. She was being hunted, and whoever had orchestrated it had access, resources, and precision timing. Shadow shifted, emitting a low whine that Keller barely noticed. But Amira understood. The dog knew something wasn't right, just as he had back in Syria. She glanced down at him, a silent promise flickering in her gaze. Stay with me, we're not done yet. The door opened again, another figure stepping through. Someone she didn't recognize. The door clicked open with practiced precision. A woman in her early 40s stepped inside. Crisp black suit tailored sharp, badge clipped to her belt. Special Agent Dana Voss, DHS Cyber Forensics Division. Her eyes swept the room, lingering briefly on Shadow, then settling on Amira. I'm here to assist with the device analysis, Voss announced. We suspect an embedded tracker. Without further small talk, Voss pulled a sleek field kit from her shoulder bag and placed it on the table. I'll need the phone first. The younger officer re-entered with Amir's device, encased in an evidence bag. Voss retrieved it, extracted a slim scanner from her kit, and began a methodical sweep. The scanner emitted soft pulses of blue light across the phone's surface, occasionally pausing as Voss adjusted the sensitivity. Amira remained silent, observing every movement. Shadow, still at her side, watched intently, muscles coiled in quiet vigilance. There, Voss muttered after a moment, zooming in on a microscopic seam along the phone's charging port. Non-adhesive residue. There's likely a microtag attached beneath the casing. She glanced at Keller. Extraction will take a few minutes. We'll also sweep her clothing and belongings. Keller nodded again. Proceed. Amira's gaze hardened. I want to be present for the sweep. Keller hesitated but relented. Fine, but stay seated. Voss set the phone aside for disassembly and unzipped another compartment of her kit, retrieving a handheld spectrum analyzer. We'll start with her jacket. Amira stood, slowly removing her green utility jacket and laying it flat on the table. Shadow's posture shifted subtly, ears pricking forward. The agent moved the analyzer over the outer fabric. No reaction. Then over the sleeves, nothing. But as the device passed over the inner lining of the left side, Shadow emitted a sudden low growl, rising to his feet. Everyone froze. Voss arched an eyebrow. Interesting. Shadow advanced slightly, nose pressed against the jacket's inner panel, body taut. Looks like your partner has better instincts than most of my tools. Voss remarked dryly. Amira's pulse spiked. Keller motioned for Voss to continue. Carefully, she unzipped a hidden seam in the lining and reached inside with tweezers. A moment later, she withdrew a paper-thin sliver of metal, no larger than a postage stamp, wired with a minuscule power cell and antenna. State-of-the-art tracking tech. Found it, she confirmed. She scanned the device with her analyzer. It's active. Frequency matches the secondary signal we detected earlier. Keller's jaw tightened. Can you trace the source? Voss nodded. I'll initiate a trace now. It won't be immediate, depends on signal relay architecture. As she connected the device to her laptop, Amira fought to steady her breathing. Someone had physically planted that tracker on her. The implications were staggering. Shadow sat again, eyes locked on the table where the device now lay, a sentinel guarding a silent enemy. Minutes ticked by as Voss worked. The room remained tense, every mind racing with unspoken questions. Then Voss exhaled softly, eyes narrowing at her screen. I've got a partial signal path. She swiveled the laptop toward Keller. Initial relay point routes through a leased VPN tunnel, but the hardware signature gives us more. Manufacturing batch code leads to a distributor, Kessler Dynamics, based out of Newark. Keller's brow furrowed. They specialize in industrial sensors. Why would they supply micro-trackers? Voss's fingers flew across the keyboard. Corporate structures convoluted. Shell corporations, offshore accounts. But here's something interesting. Kessler is a known supplier for a private security firm called Horizon Strategic Solutions. The name hit Amira like a hammer. She spoke before she could stop herself. Horizon works contract enforcement for a front organization, Meridian Holdings. They're deeply embedded with a trafficking network operating out of Eastern Europe and expanding into U.S. ports. Keller stared at her. You have proof? Amiriam nodded sharply. I've been following Meridian for months. Horizon's field teams handle asset transport and security for their operations. The tracker confirms it. Someone inside their network knows I'm onto them. Voss looked up. That explains the sophistication of the device. This isn't casual surveillance. It's professional. Keller's expression darkened, which means your presence here wasn't leaked by chance. They're monitoring you closely. Amira's mind raced. And if they know I'm here, my source may already be compromised. Shadow emitted a low whine as if echoing her dread. Voss disconnected the tracker, sealing it in an evidence bag. I'll continue the trace, but expect layers of obfuscation. These guys know what they're doing. Keller stood, pacing. We need to escalate this to interagency. He turned to Amira. For now, you stay here. We'll coordinate a secure channel for your editor and begin a full threat assessment. Amaya met his gaze. I'm not staying idle while they move pieces against. Keller's voice was steel. You're not in control of this room. But Amira's resolve was iron. She looked down at Shadow, drawing strength from the unwavering loyalty in his eyes. Whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone. Agent Keller's radio crackled softly as he finished a terse conversation with someone outside the room. He turned back to Amira and Special Agent Voss. Said, interagency contact is established, he said. FBI Cyber is spinning up a deeper trace on the tracker signal. We'll know more soon. Amira nodded, tension coiling tighter beneath her skin. Every revelation drew her deeper into the web she'd been trying to expose from the outside. Now the web was wrapping around her. Shadow remained at her side, alert as ever, eyes tracking every movement in the room. Keller's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, frowned and answered. Keller, his expression shifted subtly as he listened, brows drawing together in a hard line. Understood, he said. Voice clipped. He ended the call and looked to Voss. We may have something bigger. Camera review flagged irregular access to terminal surveillance earlier today. Voss straightened. Irregular how? Someone with high-level clearance accessed multiple internal feeds outside standard protocol. Security logs show their credentials were used to pull specific footage, including every camera covering Ms. Torres from the moment she entered the terminal. Amira's heart hammered. They were tracking me in real time, she said. Keller nodded grimly. And feeding that intel to whoever planted the device or orchestrated the tip that got you pulled from the flight. Voss asked, do we know whose credentials were used? Keller exhaled. The logs trace back to Deputy Director Samuel Grayson. head of terminal security. The name hit Amira like ice down her spine. She knew the name from her research. A veteran security officer with a sterling public record and deep connections across the private sector. Too deep, as it turned out. Keller continued. Grayson spent 5 years working for Horizon Strategic Solutions before joining airport security. Publicly, his record is clean, but several of his prior contracts were under Meridian Holdings' umbrella. Amira's breath caught. He's their man, she said. Inside this airport. Keller's gaze hardened. And he's the one who submitted the anonymous tip to TSA command. Voss's fingers flew across her laptop, pulling up the relevant logs. Confirmed, she said moments later. Tip originated from an encrypted proxy routed through a Horizon-owned relay server. Grayson's credentials triggered the alert in TSA's system. Amira gripped the edge of the table. He's the reason I was isolated. The reason I'm sitting here instead of boarding that plane. Shadow shifted again, sensing the rising tension in her voice. Keller paced, processing the implications. Grayson had access to your movements. He leveraged the airport's infrastructure to feed your location to outside actors. The tracker was likely planted with assistance from someone on the inside, or during a moment he engineered. Voss added. His prior employment with Horizon and the use of their relay server all but confirms deliberate intent. Amira's mind raced. How long has he been here? 3 years, Keller said, and with full clearance. He oversees camera feeds, access controls, and threat assessments. If Meridian wanted a foothold inside U.S. transit hubs, he's the perfect asset. Moablis Amiradlis Ned. Manit Mubler. Steady despite the storm in her chest. We need to move on him, now. Keller's expression remained unreadable. Interagency is handling that, but until we neutralize his ability to act, we proceed cautiously. No contact attempts, no public moves. Amira's eyes blazed. I'm not going to sit still while a trafficker in uniform manipulates this entire airport. Keller held her gaze. You won't, but we do this right. Otherwise, we risk tipping our hand and losing any chance to unravel the network from the inside. Boss spoke up. There's more. Grayson's access log shows an unscheduled security sweep order issued for Gate 47, 30 minutes before Ms. Torres was pulled. Keller frowned. Gate 47? The secondary gate linked to private charter traffic, Voss clarified. A known weak point for illicit asset movement. If they planned a transport today, Grayson may have cleared the way. Amira's pulse. Then if my presence threatened that operation, then isolating you served 2 purposes, Keller finished. Remove the threat. Control the narrative. Voss looked to Keller. We need to lock down Grayson's access before he covers his tracks or initiates fallback protocols. Keller nodded, already moving to his radio. Command, this is Keller. Initiate soft containment on Deputy Director Grayson. No alarms. I want all digital access frozen now. A pause. Yes, full interagency hold authorized. He ended the call, eyes returning to Amira. You've contained the first breach, but this tells us something else. Amira tilted her head. That they knew I was close. Keller nodded. Closer than you realized. Grayson's involvement means Meridian's stateside operations are far more embedded than our intelligence suggested, and they know exactly who you are. Amira met his gaze, steel in her voice. Then they know I'm not stopping Shadow Lads. I cannot let them go, Inspire of all things. Keller straightened. Good, because this just escalated to the next level. The air inside the security room had shifted palpably. Agent Keller's radio traffic was growing more frequent. His voice low, clipped. Amira sensed the urgency spreading beneath the thin veneer of control. Shadow remained pressed close to her leg, body taut, gaze flicking to every new movement in the room. Grayson's betrayal had transformed the entire playing field. If a high-level insider had orchestrated her detainment and surveillance, Meridian's reach was deeper than she'd feared, and far more dangerous. Amira knew one thing. Waiting for the system to course-correct wasn't an option. She had to force momentum. She pulled her badge from under her jacket and placed it on the table with deliberate care, the laminated card catching the sterile overhead light. I'm invoking my rights as a credentialed member of the press, she said, voice steady but loud enough to command attention. Keller paused mid-conversation and turned to her. Ms. Torres, I am requesting immediate FBI oversight of this incident, she continued. eyes locked on his. Your evidence confirms my detainment was triggered by a false report from an individual with known ties to organized trafficking operations. My investigation is protected under federal law. You are now holding a journalist with material evidence against an international criminal enterprise. This is no longer an airport security matter. Keller's jaw flexed. You're walking a dangerous line here. No, Amira replied, unwavering. Grayson crossed that line the moment he weaponized your system against me. I will not be silenced to cover his tracks. Voss glanced at Keller, expression unreadable but not unsympathetic. Keller exhaled sharply. Fine, I'll call in Bureau Liaison Command. He keyed his radio. Control, this is Keller. Initiate Bureau Contact Protocol, flag priority under Press Intervention Clause. Static crackled, then a terse acknowledgement. Understood. Bureau agents inbound ETA 10 minutes. Amira sat back, the thrum of adrenaline in her veins matching her rapid pulse. She had forced Keller's hand. The presence of FBI agents would add an external layer of accountability and potentially force deeper investigation into Grayson's role and Meridian's network. But the risks remained sharp. Meridian wouldn't sit idle now. If Grayson had help, others inside this building were likely watching. And worse, her move would flush them into action. Shadow shifted, pressing subtly against her side as if grounding her focus. Minutes passed in tense silence until the door buzzed. Keller checked the feed on the wall monitor. Agents approaching. Moments later, 3 men entered the room, black suits, bureau and IDs visible on their lapels. Demeanor brisk. The lead agent, a stocky man in his mid-40s, introduced himself. Agent Pollard, FBI Counter-Trafficking Division. We've been briefed, we'll be assuming oversight. Keller gave a curt nod. The subject is Ms. Torres. Material evidence confirms unlawful tracking and false reporting linked to a known trafficking network. Pollard's eyes flicked to Amira. Ms. Torres, we'll need your full statement and any investigative materials you can provide. Amira inclined her head. You'll have them. Shadow's ears twitched as the second agent, a taller man with a buzz cut, entered fully into the room, positioning himself along the far wall. The dog's gaze locked onto him, body going rigid. Amira felt the change instantly. Shadow's body leaned forward, muscles coiling, tail held low and stiff. He emitted a low, warning growl, deep, vibrating through the floor. Every head in the room turned. Keller's brows drew together. Control your dog? But Amira wasn't so sure this was misbehavior. She glanced down, voice low but firm. Shadow obeyed, barely, but remained locked onto the tall agent, growl intensifying. Voss's eyes narrowed. That's not a standard reaction. Miera's pulse hammered. Shadow had never failed her instincts. She rose slowly, gaze sharp. Agent Pollard, she said evenly. Your team arrived as 3. May I see the identification of all agents present? Pollard blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Of course, he presented his badge, followed by the third man, a wiry agent who passed the scrutiny without incident. But the tall man hesitated a fraction too long before producing a badge. Voss stepped forward sharply. Hold it up. Closer. The man complied, but Amira's investigative instincts flared. The badge holographic strip was wrong, subtle, but the texture mismatched bureau issue she'd seen countless times in legitimate press briefings. Shadow's growl erupted into a bark, short, sharp, insistent. The room tensed. Keller's hand hovered near his sidearm. Voss's voice sliced through the air. Badge on the table. With deliberate slowness, the man placed the badge down. Boys scanned it swiftly, fingers flying across her laptop. Seconds later, she looked up, eyes blazing. Forgery. That badge serial belongs to an agent on extended medical leave. Keller's radio burst with sudden static. Control to Keller, alert, compromise in bureau entry records. Possible false credential entry flagged moments ago. The tall man's gaze flicked coldly across the room, calculating, assessing options. But Shadow was already moving. In a blur of controlled motion, the canine lunged forward, intercepting the man's attempted movement toward the door. The dog's weight slammed into the imposter's legs, sending him sprawling. Shadow pinned him with practiced force, growling fiercely. Keller and Voss had weapons drawn, moving in. Pollard cursed under his breath. We've been infiltrated. Amira stood frozen, adrenaline surging, mind racing. Meridian's reach was deeper than she'd imagined, and now it was standing right in front of her, cornered and exposed. But this wasn't over, not even close. Chaos erupted the moment Shadow brought the imposter down. Keller and Voss moved fast, weapons trained on the man as Shadow maintained his hold, growls deepening with every twitch of resistance. The wiry third agent, Verified, pressed his comm, calling in a tactical team. Agent Pollard's face was a mask of controlled fury as he barked rapid instructions securing the perimeter. The man on the ground, face pressed against the cold floor, shifted his gaze toward Amira with a look that sent ice through her veins. There was no panic in his eyes, only calculation, as if this was a contingency, not a defeat. Keller knelt beside him, voice cold. Name, affiliation. The imposter said nothing. Voss retrieved flex cuffs, securing the man's wrists with efficient force. Shadow remained poised, teeth bared inches from exposed skin. Voss tapped her comm. Immediate ID run. Physical scan and biometric cross-check. Highest priority. Within seconds, a field tech arrived, equipment ready. As they scanned the imposter's prints and facial features, the system hummed. A few tense moments passed before the results populated the screen. Voss read them aloud. Matthias Kruger, Austrian national, known associate of Rainer Novak, confirmed logistics coordinator for Meridian Holdings' North Atlantic trafficking operations. A collective intake of breath swept the room. Keller's expression hardened. He's not here by accident. Amira's blood ran cold. She'd seen Novak's name in classified reports, an elusive figure coordinating transshipment of trafficked persons through European and U.S. ports. If Kruger was operating here, they were dealing with operational command, not hired muscle. Pollard's voice was ice. Why target this operation? Why risk exposure inside a federal containment zone? Kruger finally spoke, voice low and chillingly composed. You're already too late. You think removing me will stop what's in motion? His gaze flicked pointedly toward a mirror, lips curling into a thin smile. He's been marked, and soon she'll be discredited, irrelevant. Shadow growled anew, sensing the intent behind those words. Keller leaned in. How? Silence. Then a faint smirk. Voss's fingers flew across her tablet, checking recent access logs and comm traffic. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Keller Kruger's badge was used 30 minutes ago to access evidence processing. Keller's eyes snapped to Amira. Your bag? The words hit like a blow. Amira's duffel, still untouched since she'd entered the first room, had been moved under the guise of standard security sweep. And now, her instincts screamed the truth. They planted something, she said hoarsely. They're setting me up? Keller issued rapid orders. Secure the evidence bay, now. Nobody in or out without verification. 2 tactical agents sprinted from the room. Voss accessed the chain of custody logs. Timestamp confirms it. Kruger's credentials authorized a bag inspection 3 minutes before bureau arrival. Pollard cursed under his breath. They wanted her flagged and arrested before we got here. Mariath's mind raced. If Meridian's operatives succeeded in framing her, every piece of her investigation would be compromised, every contact endangered. Her credibility would be destroyed, and worse, the network would gain operational cover. Voss tapped her comm again. Visual on the evidence bay feed. The screen displayed a split feed, standard storage lockers, one open, Amira's duffel sitting ominously inside. A technician hovered nearby, expression unreadable. That's not one of ours, Pollard said sharply. Keller keyed his mic. Control, contain evidence bay personnel, full ID verification now. As the feed shifted, a faint metallic glint caught Voss's eye. She zoomed in. There, bottom corner of the bag, foreign object. Amira's breath caught. I didn't pack anything metallic. Voss nodded grimly. I'm initiating remote lockdown. If that device is contraband, we contain it before it's documented. Keller turned to Amira. If they succeed in planting narcotics or illicit materials, you'll be flagged as complicit. The optics alone could bury your investigation. Amira's voice was steel. Then we stop it now. Tactical agents reached the bay within moments. On screen, they converged on the technician, whose face blanched visibly under scrutiny. A brief scuffle ensued, the man subdued quickly. Voss's scan confirmed the worst. a small compartment built into the duffel's lining, containing compressed packets labeled as narcotics. Keller's face was stone. Kruger's operation is more advanced than we thought. Deep logistics, forged credentials, controlled insertion. Amira met his gaze, and the attempt failed. Now we turn it. The aftermath in the security room remained electric with tension. Matthias Kruger had been hauled out under maximum restraint, eyes still coldly calculating. But the threat he embodied lingered palpably in the air. Maria's duffel was now locked under federal chain of custody, the planted evidence documented and isolated. But it wasn't enough. Maria had proven they had operational control inside the airport, and that meant they likely had more than one fallback plan in motion. Amira's mind churned. They had leverage, Kruger's presence, the compromised credentials, and the tracker Shadow had uncovered. There had to be more. Shadow paced beside her, body tight, nostrils flaring as if scenting invisible currents. Voss worked her laptop furiously, trying to deepen the digital trace from the GPS device. "We're getting partial signal lineage," she reported. "Multiple bounces through leased towers and portable repeaters. Someone's tried to scrub the path." Keller's voice cut through. "Use Shadow. If they were tracking her movements here, they left physical traces." Amira looked down at the dog, resolve hardening. "He'll know." Minutes later, they moved as a unit. Keller, Voss, Pollard's verified team, Amira, and Shadow, through a maintenance corridor adjacent to the secured evidence bay. Shadow led, snout sweeping low, body poised. He hesitated near an access door leading to an underground service tunnel used by authorized logistics contractors. Shadow's growl deepened. A voice said, confirming GPS correlation on her screen. Tracker signals bounced through this tunnel's node. The signal path wasn't fully digital, physical relay used. Keller signaled the tactical team. Breach. The team forced the door with swift precision, entering a narrow concrete tunnel laced with wiring conduits. Shadow surged forward, leashed hot, masking a concealed loading hatch. Pollard, second in command, scanned the crates with a portable spectrum analyzer. Active RFID tags recent. Voss's voice tightened. GPS relay box here. Battery warm. Keller keyed his comm. We've got a live relay point, confirm full perimeter lockdown. Shadow barked once, straining toward the hatch. Keller pried it open, revealing a freight elevator shaft descending below standard tarmac level. Where does this lead? Voss checked facility schematics. Leased through shell corporations. One of them traces back to a horizon front. The implication was clear. Meridian wasn't just moving assets through terminal traffic. They had off-grid staging areas embedded near the airport itself. Keller's voice was clipped. We're moving. Shadow takes point. The descent was tense. The elevator creaked as it lowered, the shaft illuminated only by tactical lights. At the base, a narrow corridor opened into a cavernous space. An unregistered warehouse sitting directly beneath auxiliary cargo bays. Shadow bolted forward, nose working furiously. The warehouse was a chilling tableau of organized trafficking logistics. Rows of industrial shelving lined the walls. Crates stacked high bore innocuous labels, electronics, textiles. But a quick scan revealed false panels concealing forged documents and compact personal effects. Shadow led the team to a rear storage section partitioned by heavy black drapes. He pawed insistently at the fabric. Voss drew it back. The sight froze them. Laid out across folding tables were dozens of forged passports and identity cards, meticulously crafted. Each document bore the photo of a young woman, expressions varying from hopeful to terrified. Amira's breath caught painfully. They're grooming false identities, she said hoarsely, for smuggling and forced labor or worse. Voss's scanner beeped. All high-grade forgeries, issuing nations span 3 continents. Keller moved to an adjacent table stacked with manila folders. He flipped one open. Inside were detailed profiles, surveillance photos, biographical data, transit records. Voss read over his shoulder. Target acquisition lists. These aren't random victims. They're selected, background checked, pre-cleared for specific roles. Amira's gaze swept the photos, and then her heart seized. There, among them, was the face she knew. Maria Vasquez, her source of violent cousin. Missing for 6 weeks. Her throat tightened. They have Madia, she whispered. Keller's jaw planked. We shut it down now, but Shadow was already moving again. deeper into the shadows beyond the tables. He stopped at a battered locker, growling low. Keller pried it open. Inside were more photos, printed surveillance images, and in the center of the stack, Myra's own face stared back, marked with a red slash. Amira stood frozen in front of the battered locker, her breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob. The pile of surveillance photos stared back at her, impersonal yet intimate in their silent testimony to lives under threat. But it was the image at the very top that shredded her composure. There, beneath the red slash and faded ink, was a face she knew better than her own reflection. Sophia Malik, her best friend. Missing for over a year. Sophia, with her easy smile and sharp wit, who had supported Amira through the hardest days of their fledgling careers. Who had vanished without a trace during an assignment in Istanbul. Every effort Amira had made to trace her had led to dead ends, official indifference and private heartbreak. And now, here Sophia was, coldly catalogued among Meridian's next wave of victims. Amira's knees buckled slightly as the weight of the moment hit her. She reached trembling fingers toward the photo, tracing the familiar curve of her friend's jawline. "Sophia," she whispered. Keller noticed instantly, moving to her side. "You know her?" Amira swallowed hard. "Sophia Malik, investigative journalist. My best friend, she disappeared last year working on a trafficking story." The implications twisted like a knife in her gut. I thought she was dead." Keller's jaw tightened. "Or worse, being prepped for relocation through this pipeline." Amira fought to steady her breathing, but grief and fury warred within her. Questions assaulted her mind. How had they found Sophia? Had her own investigation inadvertently exposed her friend? What else had Meridian buried beneath these layers of false identities and erased lives? The ache in her chest sharpened to a spear point of resolve. She would not lose Sophia to the darkness. Shadow pressed closer, sensing her distress, warm body grounding her spiraling thoughts. She knelt beside him for a moment, fingers tangling in his fur, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm not leaving without answers," she whispered fiercely. Keller's voice remained calm but firm. "You've got forensic teams en route. We'll comb this place top to bottom. If there's a lead on your friend, we'll find it." But even as he spoke, Voss's voice cut in, sharp with tension. "Movement, East Corridor, we're not alone." Keller signaled the team, tactical positions. "Secure the asset." Shadow tensed, eyes locked toward the corridor entrance. Amira rose, adrenaline burning away the fog of grief. The team fanned out, weapons ready. Shadow remained close to Amira, protective. Then it happened, too fast for thought. A figure burst from the shadows near the locker. A lean, hard-eyed man in maintenance coveralls, weapon flashing in the dim light. Targeting her, Amira's heart seized. She barely registered Keller shouting, "Contact!" before the man lunged toward her, knife glinting wickedly. But Shadow was fast. The German shepherd launched forward with primal force, intercepting the attacker mid-stride. The man staggered under the impact as Shadow drove into him, teeth sinking into the knife arm, a savage growl reverberating through the space. The blade clattered to the floor as the man howled in pain, trying to shake the relentless canine. Tactical agents closed in, subduing him in seconds. Amira stood frozen, breath ragged. Shadow returned to her side, blood flecking his muzzle, eyes still blazing with protective fury. "He was going for you," Keller said grimly, scanning the downed attacker. "Meridian must have flagged your Prillians to the site. They have eyes." Voss approached swiftly, checking the man's pockets. Encrypt comms device, he was receiving live updates. Keller's voice hardened. "We need to accelerate extraction and intel sweep. This op is burning." Amira clenched her fists. The attack only deepened her resolve. They would not erase Sophia or any of the women trapped in this nightmare. Not while she still had breath to fight. The hours that followed blurred into a relentless storm of motion and adrenaline. The tactical team secured the warehouse, sweeping every inch for additional operatives, devices, and evidence. Amira moved through it all with sharpened purpose, her grief for Sophia transformed into a blade of determination. Shadow remained at her side, ever watchful, a living shield between her and the darkness they had uncovered. Ordnance units arrived in force, documenting the scene, cataloging every forged document, digital file and physical trace. Voss coordinated the data flow, her fingers a blur across multiple terminals as evidence streamed to interagency analysts. Keller oversaw the extraction with grim efficiency, his radio a constant channel of terse updates. Within hours, the scope of the operation became clear. Meridian's pipeline wasn't an isolated effort, but a sprawling network with nodes spanning multiple airports, cargo hubs, and transit corridors across the eastern seaboard. The data retrieved from the GPS tracker, Kruger's communications, and the warehouse servers painted a chilling map of human trafficking logistics at an industrial scale. But they also provided the key to dismantling it. As the first light of dawn filtered through the battered skylights above the warehouse, Pollard approached a mirror, his expression softer than she had seen it. "Thanks to what you uncovered here, we're coordinating joint raids on every linked site. Bureau teams are moving now. You just cracked open the entire East Coast branch of this network." Amira swallowed hard, exhaustion and grim satisfaction warring within her. "Han Sophia?" Pollard's gaze held hers. "She's on the priority extraction list. One of our intel hits came back positive. Facility in Newark. We'll get her." Relief nearly buckled Amira's knees, but Shadow's steady presence grounded her again. Keller joined them, voice quieter now. "You did good, Torres, damn good. Without you and him," he glanced at Shadow, "this op would have stayed buried." Amira looked down at the dog who had saved her more times than she could count. His amber eyes met hers with unwavering loyalty, a silent bond forged in fire. Hours later, back at the secured federal facility, the aftermath of the raid unfolded in briefings and debriefings. Media outlets, tipped discreetly, began running sanitized versions of the operation. The trafficking pipeline's collapse made headlines, but Amira knew the deeper stories would take time and courage to tell. In a quiet moment, she found herself alone with Voss and Keller in a side conference room. Shadow lay at her feet, finally at ease. Keller spoke first. "Shadow's slated for retirement next month." His handlers agreed, "It's time." "My life brought me," Voss smiled faintly. "And he chose you. That's rare." Keller nodded. "The Bureau's offering an option. You can adopt him. Full support provided." The words hit her harder than she expected. In the whirlwind of the past 24 hours, Shadow had become more than a protector. He was a partner, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, trust and loyalty could endure. She knelt beside him, fingers threading through his thick fur. "Would you like that, boy?" Shadow's tail thumped softly, eyes warm with silent understanding. Amira looked up, resolve clear. "I'll take him home." The paperwork was signed within the hour. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of the operation rippled outward. Dozens of women were rescued, hundreds of forged identities were nullified. High-level arrests spread across the network's hierarchy, and through it all, Amira chronicled every step, writing the story that would finally shine a light on Meridian's shadowed empire. But it was more than a story now. It was a mission. On a cool spring morning, weeks after the raid, Amira stood at a podium in a packed conference hall, addressing an audience of law enforcement, journalists, and advocates. Shadow sat proudly at her side, eyes scanning the room. "We tell these stories because silence protects the oppressors," she said, voice fighting for someone. Thunderous applause followed, but Amira's gaze remained on Shadow. Together they had survived. Together they would continue the fight. Later that evening, in her apartment filled with files, notebooks, and the soft hum of a world still spinning, Amira watched Shadow curl beside her desk, his breathing slow and content. She smiled softly. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't facing it alone. If this story moved you, or if you believe more voices need to shine a light on the fight against human trafficking, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more real-world stories that deserve to be told. Which moment struck you the most? And what would you have done in Amira's place? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, let us know where in the world you're watching from. It's always powerful to see how far these stories can reach. Share your comment below and let's keep this conversation going.